to Cellar Sleuths. I'm Bart and this is Katie. We're both level 2 sommeliers who, since we got our certification, have just been trying to help other people enjoy wine as much as we have. Frequently during our discussions, what comes up is how to taste a wine. And I've noticed, even Katie and I, since we taste a lot, I'll sometimes be at a party and be half a glass through my wine, and somebody will go, "How do you like the wine?" And I realized I haven't really thought about it. I must like it, I'm drinking it, I'm enjoying it, but I haven't really looked into the wine and seen what the wine's telling me back. And to do that, you have to have a conscious effort. You have to have kind of a plan. In the Court of Master Sommeliers, they have something known as the deductive tasting method, and it's very thorough. We're going to break it down. We're not going to go into all of the detail, but just some of the highlights, because you can keep adding parts to it. The first thing is sight. Obviously, you can tell a red or white wine just by glancing at it. But what you really want to do is take an active look at your glass of wine. Find a bright light, put your wine under some light, bend the glass to about 45 degrees, get it over a white surface, a white tablecloth, a white wall. We have these cards we frequently use. Look over that glass and look through it. And is it clear? Do you see any haziness or turbidity in your wine? The next thing we're going to do is kind of look at the color of the wine. Obviously, you can see it's white, but a little more specifically, in white wines, they can be light, they can be yellow, or with straw white, yellow, amber, gold, a lot of different colors. Some grapes will start off in the yellow to amber or gold. As white wines age, they take on color. They'll start light, and the older the wine gets, it tends to get a little yellower. So it'll tell you a little about age, tell you a little about the grape variety, but all of them tend to darken as they age. Red wines are the opposite. They'll start off really deep, especially if they're heavily extracted wines. They'll start really deep and they'll lighten with age. In the red wines, we look at colors like purple, ruby, garnet. You can turn a little orange and brown, especially on the rim. The next thing you look at with white wines is you can spin them up and look at the legs. Spin the wine up on your glass. The wine, as it sheets down the side of the glass, if it has high alcohol or high sugar, it will throw legs, or what some people call tears. This one it's very light. So it's going to be, you just by glancing at it before you even smelled it yet, you can tell there's not going to be a lot of sugar in this, or there's not going to be a lot of alcohol. Neither of them is high, because it sheets down and doesn't throw many legs. The heavier the alcohol, the longer, thicker, and slower the legs are.
So once you've looked at it, kind of the next thing that you do, I've already been automatically doing it, is you smell it. You smell what's going on there. And you know, one of the first things, if you order a bottle of wine in a restaurant, the waitress or waiter or sommelier will bring, if you're the one who ordered it, will bring the wine to you and pour you a little bit. They're not doing that for you to taste it and see if you like it. If you've ordered the bottle, they opened it, you've ordered the bottle. That is for you to decide if the wine has gone bad. Oftentimes, if a wine is spoiled in one way or another, you're going to get that pretty much right on the nose. You're going to smell it and say, "Ooh, okay." So you've heard of wines being corked. There's several ways a wine can go bad. Being corked is one of those things. Corked, it technically means specifically that there's this fungus that's gotten on the cork and caused this TCA or trichloroanisole. And it has this smell that's actually like damp cardboard or wet dog or musty basement, that kind of smell. You know what I mean? You're like, you go down in a damp cellar, or your dog's gotten all wet and it's come in, like that kind of smell. That is a wine that is corked. A couple other common ones, we'll not go through all the faults of a wine, but a couple of the common ones. You can have an oxidized wine. So most wines have corks closing them, and that lets in a little bit of oxygen, which is good. Most of the time that helps your wine age a little, that's a good thing. But if you get too much oxygen, then your wine will go kind of bad, and it will start smelling just muted and dull, and it's oxidized, gets darker. So that can happen if the cork's not in there correctly. It can happen in older wines.
All wines
can do
will
that.
Initially or finally.
Well, eventually oxidize because the oxygen's getting in there. If you have an older bottle though and you didn't store it properly, so wines should be stored. This isn't wine, but stored sideways so that the cork stays damp there with the liquid in there. If the cork is too dry, if you have your bottle upright and the cork dries out, well, it just shrinks down and lets more oxygen, and your wine goes bad. So that's an oxidized wine. Sometimes you'll have a wine that smells like vinegar. That is what's called volatile acidity, when a bacteria called Acidobacter gets involved and causes your wine to start smelling like vinegar and kind of turn to vinegar. So wines that have turned to vinegar or that kind of acidibacter problem. And like I said, those are things you're going to probably smell right away. It's going to smell bad. It's going to smell bad, and you can let it sit and swirl it, and that bad smell's not going away. It's just there. So those are your wine faults, or your main wine faults. But let's say, you smelled it and there's no fault. Great. So what are you doing now? The first thing you can do is just put your nose down there. Some wines have a really, really strong aroma, and so you can be 6 inches away here and be like, ooh, that smells great. I already smell it. That's a high aroma wine. Sometimes you have to get a little closer and be like, medium aroma. Okay, I'm getting it now. Some wines you have to like really put your nose down in the glass. That's not much aroma there. You got to really get your nose in there, so you can kind of get an idea of the wine already by just how much aroma you're getting off of it. I will say, white wine like this, people tend to think you keep white wines in the fridge and they're cold. You serve them really cold right out of the fridge. That's too cold. And you won't smell much. It'll smell like nothing. You kind of got to warm it up a little bit then sometimes before you'll smell something. Well, and one of the first things then we're trying to decide, there's so many aromas you can pick up in a wine. And I will say, if you're just starting this and you think, all I smell is wine, I can't pick out anything, everyone's talking about all these things, I don't get it. Trust me, we've been there.
We were there.
We were there when we started doing this, and we're trying to meet and to do this for studying, and they'd say, what do you smell? I'm like, wine. I smell wine. I don't know. And they're talking about cherries. I'm like, sure. Practice. I promise you can do this. And we learn, and you learn. And then you can start to pick up those more subtle things and understand what you're smelling. What we often start with, there can be so many different things you smell in a wine glass. So you kind of have to put it in a list, in a process. So we start by trying to smell fruit. And so, in a white wine, fruits are often things like citrus, things like lime and lemon, or they're things like apples. Of course, then you can kind of parse that out a little bit. By apple, do I mean green apple, Granny Smith apple, or do I mean like those Golden Delicious apples? And even lemons and limes. For a lime, do I mean like I just squeezed lime and it's real lime juicy, or it's like key lime pie? Or, that kind of thing. You can kind of spread out.
And lemons, we have Myers lemons, and, there's...
lemon curd, lemon rind. They're all a little different. And if you're not sure, I mean, honestly, if you go to the grocery store, the next time you're in the produce section, just start smelling some of these things, you'll realize that they smell different, and you'll start to kind of pick that out.
We were smelling everything at home.
Oh, yeah.
We'd take the peel off a lemon and smell it, then we'd squeeze the lemon and smell it, and there is a difference.
You get these, different things, and you can practice it by just going to the grocery store and smelling this stuff. Red wines, the fruits we often get can be either red fruits like raspberries and strawberries and cranberries, or they can be black fruits like in Cabernet. It tends to have more black fruits like blackberries, plums, black cherries. You can have blue fruits. Often things like Merlot will have blueberry.
Boysenberries.
And boysenberries. And again, you can kind of, there's a difference. So if we say blackberry can mean, oh, it smells to me like blackberry cobbler, or it smells like blackberries that I just picked off the bramble and they're kind of dusty. That's that kind of
dusty and warm and dry in your
right?
in your bucket. Yeah.
And it matters. You say, why does it matter? Well, if you're trying to identify wine, if you're saying this is blackberries but it smells like jammy blackberry pie, that leans you a little more towards like a California Cabernet, if we're talking about Cabernet. If it smells like blackberries that are dusty and dirty and they just came off the vine, that will lean you a little actually more towards a French Cabernet, like a Bordeaux, a left bank Bordeaux blend. So it does actually matter. It does matter.
The riper that fruit, whether it's tart, picked a little underripe, or whether it's full and jammy, those make a difference to how close it was to the equator. The less ripe they are, the further away from the equator in general, and the closer they get to the equator, whether it's coming up from the south or down from the north, the more jammy and stewed or pie-like they smell, which will give you an idea kind of where you're at, what part of the country you're at.
Yep. But once you've smelled the fruit, you can kind of say, okay, got my fruit. Now I'm going to move on and see what else can I smell in this, because even though grapes are fruit, turns out wine can have a lot of other aromas for lots of other reasons.
There are a lot of non-fruit aromas. One of the biggest ones we talk about is wood. In our sense, it's almost always oak. You'll get notes of dill and caramel and coconut and smoke and toast and nutmeg and those kinds of things. All comes just from the oak itself. New World wines tend to have a little more oak. Old World wines tend to have a little less. But oak is one of the biggest non-fruit flavors. Other things you'll pick up are things like flowers, floral aromas. White wines like this one, you look for things like yellow daisies, honeysuckle, jasmine, baby's breath. It's usually very light.
White blossoms from like a blossoming tree, you know.
Yeah, those kinds of things. Then you can get vegetal. One of the biggest vegetables both in white wines and red wines is bell peppers. You can get some asparagus, you can get some celery, those kinds of notes, which sounds kind of funny, but that's actually a critical question. Every time you smell the wine, you have to go for those too. If you get bell pepper or celery or that note in a wine, it's going to be Sauvignon Blanc. If it's a red wine, it's going to be a Cabernet Sauvignon.
Or Cabernet Franc.
Yeah, or Cabernet Franc has a little, not as much, but it does. Other things you can find, herbal notes. Herbal notes are kind of all over the page. With white wine, for me, it's fresh cut grass. Or if you're laying in a yard, like watching the stars, that kind of fresh greenness you'll get. In red wines, it's thyme and sage and more of those dried fruits that you'll pick up, which is really kind of nice. People talk about spices in wines. You can get way in the weeds with these too. For me, white wines have kind of a white pepperish note, if you call spices, and red wines more black pepper. It's really about that simple. Other things that come up is earth. For me, again, being a farmer, if you plowed and rolled over the soil, that rich loamy character. My wife does potting this time of year. That potting soil has that same loam. I know Katie, when we talk about it, she'll say, oh, I get forest floor. A sense of walking in a damp forest, kicking at the ground, and you get that.
But this is where wine can be so fun because it brings this to you. And you can smell, like, to me, one of my favorite wines is Rioja from Spain. I smell it, and it smells to me like fresh mulch you just laid out, and walking through like a forest and it's just rained and it's damp and you're going through this beautiful, it just brings like these wonderful pictures to your mind if you really, get into it.
Yeah, and wines have no forest floor in them. No. Recognize what we're smelling with all these things we just mentioned to you are just chemicals that they have in common. Whether esters or aldehydes or whatever chemical structure it is, those are the same chemicals that are in high concentration in the soil and the earth. And so when you smell those, it reminds you of that. One last one we should talk about, maybe with non-fruit characters, people talk about mineral. For me, it's kind of like after a rain, that scent you get. Some people call it petrichor, wet concrete, wet rocks, waterfalls.
You know that smell when you're at the base of a waterfall, that kind of wet rock.
And that's smell. A minerally wet rock smell. And you'll get that big in some white wines, and it's got a crispness that goes with it. Already, you haven't tasted this wine yet, and you can start to get a sense that it maybe even came from chalky soil, maybe a little further north.
Or dry, like it smells like a dusty gravel road. That sounds crazy, but I promise you do this, you'll start smelling those things. You will.
You will. And all of these things play a difference in picking what grape is in your glass.
And where it came from.
And little things.
Okay, so now we have looked at our wine. We have smelled our wine. We've got a lot of ideas already in our head. And now we get to taste it. So now tasting wine. How do you taste wine? So tasting wine, of course, you can just drink it, but you can miss a lot. So oftentimes, you can just start with a small sip and kind of let it coat your mouth a little bit. Oftentimes, if you're tasting things like bourbon and stuff too, best thing to do, coat your mouth first. Don't go right off your first sip and deciding how the wine tastes. It's going to taste different with your second one. So then take another little sip and taste again. But hold it in your mouth and think about it, and then see what you're kind of tasting. You smelled all those things. You smelled all those fruits. Does it taste like it smells? It doesn't always. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it tastes very different from what you thought you were going to get with the smell. But that's part of it. And you can evaluate, again, the things we kind of talked to. You can talk through. You can go through the same things. Are you tasting? What kind of fruits are you tasting? What kind of other elements are you tasting? Are you tasting peppery notes? Are you tasting kind of minerally notes? Like if you're by a mineral, if you buy a waterfall, sometimes you kind of get that taste in your mouth. Are you tasting those things? So that's part of it. Are you tasting the things you thought you smelled, or are you tasting something different? You can also see how sweet or dry is it. When we say wine is dry, that means it's not sweet. So it's either sweet or it's dry or it's somewhere in between. And so you can taste it and say, well, does it taste sweet, or it absolutely doesn't taste sweet? You can get tricked sometimes. In a very fruity wine, it can almost taste sweet, but it's not sweet. Almost, it's just fruity.
To me.
Yeah, it can taste sweet, and you think that's sweet. But one trick is if you close your nose so you can't smell it, or you just taste it, then you'll taste if it's sweet or not. That fruit characteristic that you're smelling will go away when you can't smell. And then you can really taste, is it sweet, or am I just kind of getting this impression of sweetness from all the fruitiness that I'm getting? So that's part of tasting for dryness and sweetness. One of the other things, this is not a red wine obviously, but if you have a red wine, you can taste for tannins. So tannins are kind of the stuff that's in the skins and the stems of grapes, particularly red wine. And red wine, it's red because you let it sit on its skins. White wine, you can even make white wine out of red grapes if you just press it right off the skin right away. That color all comes from the juice sitting with the skins. So when the juice sits in the skins, those tannins will get in there. And what is tannin? It's kind of that, if you drink red wine, you feel it kind of coating the top of your mouth. What you can do with red wine too, if you're trying to decide how tannic is you put it in your mouth, swish it up underneath your lips up here, and you will feel, is it kind of grippy there. Really tannic wines like Nebbiolo, which is the grape, or Barolo is the region of Italy. It's like your tongue is, your lips are stuck up here. You're like, oh, it's really,
very tannic.
You'll feel it. You'll feel the tannins. So you can assess for how high are the tannins. It's one of the things you'll do with a red wine, not a white wine, but you would with a red wine.
White wines that she mentioned have no tannins in them, or very, very little tannin. They get their structure from acid. And you can tell acidity, and it sounds kind of crazy, but you take a mouthful of wine, you can take a sip, wash it around in your mouth, swallow it, maybe swallow twice, and then bend your head forward and open your lips just a little, and then count to yourself how long it takes before you need to close your lips before it drips, because you'll salivate. The acid causes salivation. Sometimes you get 1,000 and you already have to close your mouth. That's an acidic wine. Sometimes you get to 1,002 or 1,003 before you start to drip, and that'll be a less acidic wine. And of course you do this from low, medium minus, medium plus to high. A high acid wine, maybe like a Sauvignon Blanc. A low acid wine, maybe some like a California Chardonnay. The next thing is alcohol. We already have a sense what the alcohol is going to look like because we swirled our glass before. We already have an idea that this one, alcohol is going to be low. But when you take a sip, when you're thinking again about alcohols, or a second pass at alcohol through taste, you'll get a warmness up in your nose, maybe in the back of your throat, a warmness in your chest, right into here, especially red wines. And sometimes it takes a second or two to develop. And also give you a sense of whether they're very north from the equator because they're not very ripe, less alcohol, closer to the equator, higher sugar equates to higher alcohol. So again, helps place these wines in at least two-dimensional space.
Well, and so if you're doing it like us and you're trying to identify a wine blind, you've gone through all of that, and what we do for the Court of Master Sommeliers when practicing is we fill out a deductive tasting sheet. So
you do this on the test too.
You go through the same thing. So we just did all of this, you fill it all out, and you use all of that information to then come to your conclusion and decide what wine you think it is. And so that, we tune in because we're planning on going on and kind of going grape by grape in major grapes and walking you through how to taste each grape. So we just talked about how to taste, but how does that apply to specific wines? We just told you we can use all of that to blind identify wines. So let's show you how we do it. I've gone for a while, I was so used to smelling wines and to tasting wines. Every time it was such a habit, I would pick up my pop cup and find myself smelling my pop cup and then just be like, what am I doing? Put it back
I've
down.
done that with a beer before. I'll go up and I'll sniff at a beer. It's like, oh, you hope nobody noticed.
All right, what is that?
Even though I'm sure the beer tasters do the exact same thing.
I'm sure they do. I don't think there's pop tasters.
No, probably not. Thanks for tuning in.